Leadership Network family, we are back for our weekly show, Church Next. If this is your first time, my friends Jennifer and Jade, we just want to say welcome. We are so glad you're here. If you're a straggler, and if you're a straggler, this is the first time you've ever hung out with us. First of all, that's uncool. It is absolutely uncool. And from this day forward, we want to make sure that we are on every notification imaginable so that you can indulge us in conversations like this that we're having. That's really important. We're calling this series Back to the Future, and this is our last episode within this series. You don't want to miss the next one. We're going to be talking about Wonder Women on Mission. And if you're up under any rock, come on out from up under that rock. Anyway, today is going to be dope because we're talking about how to achieve missional results by asking this one question. And so, first of all, before we dip into this, what's up, Jennifer? What's up, Jade? How y'all doing?
Good. I'm glad to be back. Missed a couple of episodes because I've been super busy. Like you said, God is blessing us with open doors. So that's been great. But it's glad to be back home.
What were some of those open doors that got open for you?
So I was able to host the main stage of Big Ticket Festival, which is a huge Christian music festival here in Michigan. And it went so well. It was so much fun. We was able to get Hustle Pay Eat t-shirts on hundreds of backs, which was always a bonus as well. I was able to minister to people. Pastor Troy was the main speaker, and he even baptized a few people as well while he was there. So that was amazing. So really great time of ministry. And then also I was I was teaching poetry at a youth creative arts worship camp. So that was amazing as well. There were some girls that had never even heard that there was poetry in the Bible. So it really opened up their eyes to scripture and to a new way of expressing and communicating the gospel. So that was exciting. So yeah, I've been very busy, still trying to catch up on sleep.
In fact, I was just talking to your pastor the other day. We're actually going to have him back in the future. He's re-releasing his book. And so it's coming out soon. So I want to have him back, but then also to our audience, hey, you have access to some really honestly world-class leaders in Jade and Jennifer. And so everything from poetry, if you want to host something at your church, you want to strengthen the next generation of your church, I want to encourage you to get in contact with Jay Richards because she the bomb.com. Jennifer, you done have some open doors. Talk to us.
I have, and I've been in and out, just like Jade here, and just doing my thing, teaching marketing. We had our first Holy Convocation for our fellowship that went well, and so I was in Philadelphia for a week and a half, and now I'm getting ready to do some virtual conferences and getting ready to head down to Nashville, Haiti, Alred, and Lifeway Bookstore to be one of the keynote speakers for Church Communications Conference, which is going to be huge in September. So I'm excited. I'm really excited.
You know, there was a report by Dr. Warren, I believe, called The Faces of the Church. And his conclusion is that the church is the church is already diverse, but when it comes to minorities and people of color, he advocates that the world will listen to us and what we have to say. And so to our audience, man, like Jennifer, when you're talking about strengthening your communications, strengthening the way you're perceived when it comes to marketing, and as some of my friends would say, it's not marketing, it's actually ministry. I want to encourage you again to reach out to Jennifer Benton because listen, she the bomb.com too. And it's a reason why they on the show. So welcome everybody. I know that was a long introduction, but I just wanted to take a pause and just let y'all know, man, like honestly, I think the best thing we can do as leaders, as church leaders, is learn and live out the fact that the body of Christ together, man, we really can experience impact and you know, multiplication and things like that. So that leads us to today's topic that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
So awesome. I was like,
We,
who's
we
going?
just we just wanted a long pause because they tell you in coaching, they tell you in coaching, like when you're asking questions and you let them answer, to give them that long pause, and it may seem awkward, but it's all sitting in. Settle it.
Oh God. Now I'm cracking up. I gotta pull it in. So shout out to the long awkward pause. You know, we've had such a good run. Excuse me. We've had such a good run. We actually needed one of those to happen.
Keep us humble.
Keep us humble.
Keep us humble. Woo. So today we are talking about, in our Back to the Future series, we're talking about how the one question we have to ask, and of course, you know, in our nation that is becoming more and more divided, keeping the right perspective can be exhausting.
Right.
Even in the church, we may be tempted to choose sides, but what can we really say when it comes to solutions that move us toward Jesus's prayer in John 17 about unity?
Mm.
So, in order for us to fully embrace unity and lean into our mission, we have to ask certain questions. So, speaking of questions, I have one for you, Myron. And
Yeah.
that is, the church is at a crossroads. Why is today's conversation so necessary?
Well, I think, like, honestly, I think, and y'all can speak to this too, but I think at the heart of every Christ follower who doesn't have a title of pastor or bishop or apostle or whatever is like a missional imprint. Like, there's something on our, like, Ecclesiastes says that eternity is written on our heart, right? And so I think if eternity is written on our heart, then eternity exists for a reason. And it was out of eternity that God really leaned into this beautiful specimen called humanity, right? And so when he creates humanity, he doesn't do it from a place of indifference. It's very, very purposeful, right? And so I think today's conversation is pivotal because I think we have to model the life of Jesus when it comes to how he fulfilled the mission of the Father, right?
Yeah.
And in this series, I think it's so easy to especially with everything that we've encountered over the last couple of years, to like experience mission drift, right? And I know y'all can attest to that. I mean, y'all in ministry, y'all work with different type of ministry leaders, and it's easy to get off. And I think today's conversation is an attempt to say, hey, let's recenter ourselves and what matters, so that the future looks more like John 17, looks more like Jesus praying and saying, hey, like, my number one prayer is that you will become one.
Yeah.
Right. And so becoming one, if that's going to happen, it's going to be because we talk about things like we're talking about today.
Yeah. Before I get into the second question, can we just reiterate a bit? Because in the first question, we spoke about the church being at a crossroads. Can you talk about what that crossroads is and what it's currently looking like?
Yeah. So last week, we talked about metaphor, right? And how the metaphors we use inform and enforce the way that we create systems and structures that either work for or against the mission of God, right? And so if I see the church as a business, then all of a sudden my priorities change. My priorities change from, how many people are in the seats. And we said last week, that's how you know type of metaphor that you're subscribing to when it comes to the narrative of your church, by what we celebrate, by what we're measuring, by what we get mad about, by the hills, whatever's happening in the boardroom, whatever you're fighting about, that becomes what's important. And so when you think about the church, we've had a long history of seeing the church as a business. We counting seats, we counting how many people coming in, we're counting how much money they have, how many volunteers. Why? Because all of that is related to a bottom line that ultimately, you know, if you look at a lot of churches, our overhead or our operations primarily consists as a large percentage of staff salary. I was looking at one organization, one Christian nonprofit organization, and 74%, actually, this was a church, 74% of all the money comes in goes towards the leadership for salaries. Right. And so, again, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but like if we don't ask some serious questions about the metaphors we're using, then I think we can never get to the question that every leader needs to ask if they're going to experience missional results.
Okay. So
you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean. So there's this idea of Sinai vision. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Sinai vision versus upper room vision. Can you talk to us about that?
So, okay, so one thing is this: if there's something in the Bible, this is for our audience, you need to teach your kids this. If there's a word in the Bible that you cannot, pronounce, just pronounce it the best way you can and don't tell nobody. It's cool.
I feel like there's certain words that nobody is completely sure the correct pronunciation. And
yeah, it's like somebody said it and then we're following it. Say it however you want to say it.
So there's Sinai vision versus upper room vision. What's that all about, Myron? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so here's my question for one of you. What happened when the children of Israel came to Mount Sinai when they were in the desert? Sorry to test your biblical knowledge.
Is that why they was given the 10 Commandments?
Yeah, so they're coming out. Remember, Moses goes before Pharaoh and he's like, let my people go, and finally they get let go. They cross the Red Sea, they enter into, they're on their journey, right? And along the way, the people started saying things like, we want a covenant like the other nations, or we want a king like the other nations. And God was trying to draw near to them beyond the title of a king. Like he was trying to establish a covenant that was unlike any other covenant, right? That they had ever experienced. Yet they kept saying, we want to live like the nations, right? So they were really imposing on God a legal structure that he didn't even want. God never wanted, and consequently he gave them what they wanted. And because when he gave them what they wanted, they end up, as Paul would say, when we see the law, we actually see that we're dead. So it actually, the very thing that was meant to bring life actually brought death. And so Moses goes up on this mountain and he gets this vision from God. And the problem is he's the only one who got it.
Yeah.
And where that relates to like what we're talking about today is a lot of times we as leaders get vision in silos.
Yeah.
And there's a really good book that's helpful for this. It's called Culture Map. And one of the things she says is, say it takes, an hour to get a vision for something, right? It actually should happen fast. The more people that have input in vision, the longer it takes. The less people, the faster it goes. And so now Moses comes down, he's quick, he's there, he gets vision from God, and he he comes down, and like they at the club, they done created a club in the wilderness, they sipping big margaritas, they worshiping Moloch. I mean, like they're having a crazy time. Aaron is like, he done drank the Kool-Aid too. They having and all of a sudden they're not even ready for vision, number one. But then number two, this vision comes in a silo. So now when it comes to implementing, think about this. I think Moses was up there for 40 days, right? But it took 40 years for them to get to the promised land.
Yeah.
So it takes longer to get somewhere if the people weren't initially involved in the vision.
Mm.
The implementation is longer. Versus if we took time together to discover vision, then the implementation would be a lot faster, quicker, because there's buy-in. And I think that's the difference between Sinai vision, Mount Sinai vision, and upper room vision. There were 120 there versus one. And they all had one experience. They were probably articulated differently, but we know what happened. The mighty wave comes through, some crazy sci-fi Stranger Things start happening, like fire on their head. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. It's like, a scene from some sci-fi deal, but they all experience what Jesus talked about together. And then look what happens after that happens. Thousands are in Jerusalem around the same time. And Peter is then able to cast the vision for the kingdom of God, where thousands of people came to Christ, as opposed to the number of people who were ended up dying in the wilderness, wouldn't come to God because they weren't even a part of the initial vision when Moses communicated. And I think the practical side to that is, like, as leaders, do we enjoy getting vision from God ourselves, or do we co-create because we're the body of Christ? And I think therein lies the tension as church leaders that we have to really navigate.
So
What's
good.
going through your mind, Jennifer, as I'm talking about this?
Thinking of the story, and data-wise, a generation is 40 years. And so when you think about it, it took them 40 years to cross over into the promised land. But if you notice, that generation passed. It wasn't Moses' generation that got to go. They actually got with him. People never explore that part of the story. He died. He didn't go into the promised land, but his generation also did not go. It took a whole other generation to catch what God had given Moses to carry it on. And then it was Joshua's generation that went.
Right.
Think about it, from that perspective, you look at Moses, he had his brother Aaron helping him, and his sister Marion was part of it. When you have a leader that's catching a vision, oftentimes, especially when they see you transition from one stage in life to another, they often can't receive from you because they can't get over. They can't get over the whole paradigm of who you were. So Joshua's generation, they grew up under Moses.
Right.
So it was easier for them to catch because all they ever saw him was this great leader that set us free from Egypt.
Right.
So when we think about it, it's like that Sinai vision. I think a lot of us are living through that. We're seeing that in place now, where we have pastors that are Generation X dealing with the baby boomer generation, millennial pastors dealing with Generation X and baby boomers. And those people might have seen you as the little kid that was running around the church being bad.
Right.
Vision. So now it's like that Sinai experience that many of us millennials are living through. We're like, man, we got to kind of pass it on to Generation Z and whoever else after them. We got to wait till this old generation dies out so that we can really move how we want to move.
Yeah, I think that's important because I think that, a lot of churches may be stuck in a place where they're trying to have this upper room experience with a generation that was never meant to catch the vision, So I think sometimes we can pour too much effort into trying to get people that are never meant to catch it, and we in turn neglect the generation that are not only going to catch it, but they're going to run with it and bring it into fruition. So I think that just goes to speak how important our youth are, and not just our youth but our children, and putting them in positions where they can lead. The Edge is notorious for putting very young people, we have 9-year-olds running our sounds, our lights, our cameras, everything. And because we believe in that, we believe in this is the generation that is going to run with this. So let's put them in positions right now where they are in the upper room when it's time for that Holy Spirit to come down with all the vision. Do you know what I mean? When we're not exposing the next generation to these upper room experiences and spaces, then you're stuck then with a generation that are not going to catch it. So I think that's an important point, Jennifer.
Yeah, just think about two things that you just said. So where you're talking about the edge, and last year, y'all kicked off the Hustle, Pray, Eat conference. I'm gonna be there again. We're gonna be big kicking it. And when I walked in, I told Pastor Troy this. I said, man, like how I felt when I walked in was that there was a spirit of excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And from beginning to end. And I think that, like, the way a church leads something, or the way that we create, the outcome will always be telling of, was it the vision of that one leader or the vision of all of them?
Yeah.
And when you look in the upper room vision experience they had, there were 120 diverse different people.
Mm-hmm.
There were women there.
Mm-hmm.
One more time for the people in the back. There were women there. Jesus's mama, people who had financed Jesus's ministry. John, like, dude, by that time was probably like 17, maybe, right? When he first started, he was like 14. So you have this group of people who are diverse and yet share this common experience, that then when they're ready to execute, when they're ready to get back to the future, when they're ready to fulfill the kingdom of God, like it takes off like wildfire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we find the barriers to ministry, where we're not having wildfire experiences because we're so focused on being the solo visionary versus sharing the vision with the people of God.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I'm just gonna drop the mic right there.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, and I'll be honest. Like, it's been quite the journey for me, because when I first started church planting on this side of the prison walls, I would go to all these conferences and I would see the big name people on the stage, and I would see people leading big churches, and I would see people doing great things, and like, dude's name is just in lights and it's ringing. You know what I mean? And again, nothing wrong with that. God raises us up to be influencers and things like that. But it's like, I had to come to this one conclusion. I was in Florida, like 3 or 4 months ago, and I was with one of my disciples, and I looked over, I was almost in tears because it hit me. And I said, man, like, my number one goal in life is for you to be successful. You know, my man, we talking about you, man. Yeah. My number one goal in life is for you to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken a while for me to get to that place where it's not about me building my ministry.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, like, what is God saying to his church? And then how do I take responsibility to facilitate it with the church versus for the church?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Peace, hello.
Hello, I was just talking about you. We're having a conversation about, you know, Mount Sinai vision versus upper room vision, you know, where it's like, do I create vision in a silo and then take it to the people? Or do we co-create and co-imagine together what God is saying, you know, and how it's different? You know what I mean? It's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just want to give a shout out to you, man, on that. You know, like, just like you said, you're not in silos. Really appreciate you. Just got off a podcast with Ralph Moore.
Okay.
And that was just a plug. You didn't have to invite me on the original podcast. So just appreciate your heart in that, man, to live in it. So appreciate that, bro.
Yeah, man. And for our audience, if you don't know, Pastor Troy has been on our show before. And so we kind of got like a bonus today for him to drop in. Y'all go check out this book. commercial. Go check out the book.
Here's the book.
He's re-releasing it. Tell us the name of the title again.
The Edge of Redemption.
The Edge of Redemption. 10th
year edition, September 1. It will be dropping. We will have an early release date here soon.
I love it. I love it. And this is just a real life example, y'all. I'm glad that this happened like this because I think what's happening at the Edge Church, check them out. What's happening at the Edge Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan is an example of a church that's fully on board with the idea of having upper room vision experiences where they mobilize like the whole church. I mean, it's super dope, man. So that was just a little commercial for y'all.
Yeah, sorry about
that. I know how to roll with it.
That was awesome having PE drop in on us.
Right.
Yeah.
You never know what's gonna happen on the show, y'all.
You never know.
You just don't know. So it's been said, if you want to go far, go alone, or if you want to go further, go together.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage to go further when you really don't know who's with you and who's not? I'm gonna add
How would you answer that?
Oh,
can you ask it again, Jennifer?
So I'm gonna preface it with, it's been said, if you want to go far, go alone.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go further, go together.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how do you go further if you don't know who's together with you or not?
I think, the first thing that comes to my mind is, you know what, the enemy means for bad, God can use for good, right? So I think sometimes people, like, the first example that came to my mind is Jesus and Judas. You know, Judas being a part of his 12, Jesus wasn't for him, but in terms of getting the thing done, it got done right, what needed to be done. And even though it was an awful thing, it was still like a part of the whole plan. So I think sometimes people being there that aren't really for you can sometimes work in the good, you know, a lot of lessons there. Like for me, I've been in situations where I've had to work closely with people that really aren't for me, and I know they're not, but it's a thing where it taught me how to have critical conversations. It taught me how to work alongside people that you may not, you know, necessarily get along with well. It made me learn how to focus on God and not the people around. So there's a lot of lessons that are taught in those kinds of situations that kind of like build your character and your strength for the place where you're going next anyway. So the lessons that can be taught through that are sometimes beneficial. So I think, to answer the question, you can still get there if your focus is not that. So like if your focus is on the mission, if your focus is on God, because really and truly, you cannot guarantee that the people that are with you are for you. You can't guarantee it. So your focus has to be laser sharp, I would say. But I would also say, in the beginning, a lot of the times when you start something, the people that start with you are not going to be the people that end with you. So you're going to have people, I know in church planting, there's like terms for these different types of people, like people that are going to jump on the bandwagon straight away because it sounds new, it sounds shiny, it sounds exciting, but then when they realize like, oh no, this is a lot of work, you know, it's not just going to happen overnight, those people tend to drop off. And then there's, on the opposite side, there's people that are not with you in the beginning because it sounds so far-fetched, but then when you start and it starts to pick up momentum, things start coming together, and then people start to see the potential in it, then they'll join. So I think it's like it's just a mindset you have to be in when you know that God has called you to something, to know that first of all, make sure you're taking your steps and your guidance from him above all else, and just know, like, find comfort in knowing that if you're in that situation right now where you feel like there's this great idea, but people are dropping off and people are joining now that it's shiny, then you're not alone. Like, it's not unheard of. I think it's more unheard of when you have a group of people in the beginning that are so for it and they stick to it to the very end. That is a blessing. It happens. But in my experience, that's been a rarity, I'd say.
Mm.
I don't know if I said anything, but
That's good.
That's a good perspective. And so for those of you that are listening, so Jade's perspective is, you know, basically from that Judas perspective, Jesus was still able to go further even though Judas wasn't really together with him and the other disciples. Like his plan did not ultimately thwart the plan of God that was.
Yeah. So. And the only way that's going to happen, like somebody that, you know, because, you know, we do not fight against flesh and blood. So the enemy does have these tactical things that he will do and place people in certain proximity to you. And the only way that will win is if you feed into that, and that's where your energy goes. So I think there's one thing to acknowledge something and acknowledge that there's an issue. And sometimes you just have to just know it for yourself. And so that you, when you know who somebody is, you know how to operate with them accordingly. You know what I mean? You know what information to tell them, what not to tell them, and so on. And you know how to protect yourself. But sometimes they're useful in some way, shape, or form. It's a weird one.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna come from a different perspective of from a builder's perspective. So the Bible tells us to know who is laboring among us. It also says that we will know them by their fruit. And so you have to, when you're building something and you have a vision and you're trying to go further together, you're trying to pull people together to build with you, eventually you have to evaluate people. I think sometimes, especially when we're working with our friends and with our family, we tend to want to be like, oh, I'll just overlook their mistake. I'll just overlook their mediocrity. I'll just overlook. And it becomes what I call creating monsters. Because your family, your friends, they're not stupid. They know you're overlooking. They know that you're giving them grace and mercy. And a lot of times they're not honest enough to actually say, you know what, I'm not fit for what you need me to do. And I'm more of a hindrance than a helper to your vision.
And I think that's sometimes where we as Christians can find a downfall, is because sometimes we think, oh, because it's ministry, we can't tell people no, or we can't say to people like, this isn't your best fit, or this relationship isn't going to be productive. So I think sometimes we have to learn to say no as well to people, because you know, some people like to help but really just get in the way sometimes. So I think it's all about that's what I mean when I say like the people that are there that aren't really meant to be there, they help you build this muscle and this skill of being able to differentiate between where somebody is a good fit and where they are not. And then when you realize and evaluate that maybe you're not a good fit for this, how then do we as leaders and as Christians and people in ministry, how do we communicate that effectively? So what would you say, Jennifer, to that? Like, have you ever been in a situation where you've had to communicate to somebody, okay, this is not going to be a good fit for the purpose of the mission? And how did that go?
Oh my God, absolutely. I went through that in the ministry that I'm part of now, and I was dealing with someone who was part of my ministry. They were skilled, and I just had this conversation with my team last week where I said, you know, you can be skilled but not have the right heart.
Yeah.
And I would rather deal with somebody who doesn't have as much skill but has the right heart because they're teachable.
Yes.
And so I've had to let people go from my team because it was more about, you're not paying me to do X, Y, and Z, so I'm not going to give my best.
Wow.
And it was like, okay, well, obviously, you know, we don't have the budget to pay this entire team. I'm not even getting paid right now. but I'm building this ministry and I'm building for the work of God so that we can get to that point. But if we never get there, it's still not for the money, it's for the purpose of reaching souls, helping the lost, helping the community.
Mm-hmm.
My heart dictates my level of excellence that I provide. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it was more of those that type of, I don't want to say that I don't want to do this type.
Mm-hmm.
So that person kept saying, "Oh no, I want to be a part," but your actions don't show that you want to be.
Right.
So what I ended up doing, I call this my King Saul moment.
Oh.
I ended up saying, "Okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to release you from this role specifically, but let you still be part of the team, and
Mm-hmm.
you have time to contribute."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I had to do it that way because as long as I was saying this person's not doing this, they're not doing that, it looked like I was just being the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Took my hands off of it and I let them show exactly like this is what I'm willing to contribute, and they contributed nothing.
Mm.
And the team and my leadership saw, oh, she wasn't just picking him. He actually isn't showing up. He actually isn't doing anything to contribute and not even wanting to be a part like he said so. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you have to find a way, almost like that cutting the baby in half type
Mm-hmm.
of thing, where
Yeah.
you're like, okay, if I make this move, then the person's going to show their true heart and then
Yeah.
move in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think sometimes as well, when we think about teams, we think, we have like this sense of loyalty that, it has to be the people that I already know, the people that are related to me, or the people that are already in my church. Sometimes you do have to look outside of the box because, you might be listening and thinking, but I'm in a situation where I've tried to have a team and this quote is working the opposite for me. I feel like I'm getting further on my own. But I think on your own, you get to a certain point where if you want to grow, you do have to expand a team. So I would say that's something to pray about. I always pray about the relationships in my life. And I think as well, when it comes to building a team, to really pray, Lord, bring the people to me that I need for this specific task, because you might not see them around you right now, so you might revert to just doing it alone, but there's only so far you will get for that. What do you think about that?
I think it's great.
do you know?
Yay, Myron made it back. But to add to your point too, and this is what I'm learning, there are certain people that will not show up until your ministry or your business is ready for them to show up.
Yeah.
So there's literally things that you have to go through, certain achievements that you have to make, certain platforms that you even have to reach.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have people coming into your path because you're up here versus down here. Because they're like, listen, I'm not going to work with nobody that's a startup.
Yeah.
But once you have a couple years under your belt and you show like, okay, not only did I start this on my own, but I also built this, I reached this level of revenue, or with church planning, I've done these types of programs and I've reached this level of membership, partnerships in the community, then people are willing to come in and invest in you. So I would say to those of you that are watching, don't always look for someone to believe in your vision right away. Like Jade was saying, there are people that will start out with you, but there are also people that will come in the middle of your vision and help you go further. So don't shy away from those people that, they may not have believed in you at first. They had to see what you were working with in order to invest, because those are the people a lot of times that will take you to that next level.
Absolutely. Amen to that. So we were did you want us to answer that?
So I love where this conversation is going, because I think everything that you just got through saying, and then what I missed from Jade as my internet said it don't like me, is it points back to the question that I think the audience is wondering, what in the world is the question? Like, what's the one question that's going to help us achieve missional results? And here it is. Here it is. And I love for y'all to lean in on this with me. Who is not at the table?
Who is not at the table?
Who is not at the table? So for church leaders who are watching and they're, what is this? This is June, July, August. Maybe their churches are throwing some back to school something or whatever vision that has come to fruition or, being embodied in somebody's heart. Oftentimes we run with vision without looking around at the table to find out who's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what's detrimental to that is if I for example, I came to y'all a couple months ago and I said, well, let's go way back. Let's go back 17 episodes. Can y'all believe we've done 17 episodes?
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, wow. 17
episodes. So when Leadership Network decided to launch the Church Next show, mm-hmm. I could have easily was like, been like, yo, I'm gonna do this show, it's my thing, woo, woo. But I started to think, who's not at the table? Can you imagine interviewing Pastor Troy Evans without you on the show, Jade?
Yeah.
Can you imagine interviewing people like Tommy Colonen, Gary Atkinson, Josh Dochler, like all these people, the women who will be on next month for 4 weeks? Can you imagine like just me being the only one? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when I looked around, I said, man, who do I trust? Mm-hmm. Who's killing it in ministry? Who has a call in their life? Who needs to be at the table to influence church leaders around America? Mm-hmm. And I just thought like I didn't want another dude on. Like, God bless the dudes, but don't I feel like America, at least the Christian church, we hear a lot from men. Mm-hmm. It's like, and I just thought, I just don't want to be that. Mm-hmm. I want our audience, the Leadership Network family, to know that we support, trust, rely on, and not just the fact that like, who are we inviting to the table? No, it's actually even a deeper one is who can we create a table with?
Yeah. Yes. That's so true.
And I don't know about y'all, but like, how do you feel? Answer this question. How do you feel? Maybe you have friends, people in ministry, or maybe things you've done, people with. Like, how'd you feel if your best friend went out and created something and didn't even ask your opinion?
Yeah.
How would you feel if your pastor came in the next day and said, we're going here? Mm-hmm. That mm-hmm. probably wouldn't last long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet, I think that's the reason why a lot of people, quote unquote, lead a church, because the pastor or the leader never asked who needs mm-hmm. to be at the table.
Yeah. So can you talk then about, oh no, it's not that question yet. Actually, it's yours.
To ask who's missing from the table, you have to actually know what you need at the table. Mm-hmm. I look at it like, and not to get on food, because y'all know I love food. I'm a foodie. But it's it's almost like making sweet potatoes. Mm-hmm. Sweet potato pie. You can be like, what's missing? But if you never know that you need nutmeg, cinnamon, brown sugar,
wow,
milk. If you don't know that you need those items, you don't know what's missing. Mm-hmm. So have you ever, going to college, this is a great analogy right here. Going to college, you invite your friends back home for Thanksgiving. You got that one friend from a different culture, and
right,
their mom makes sweet potato fluff, but your grandma makes sweet potato pie.
Yeah.
Sweet potato pie, they're like, but my mom's sweet potato souffle or sweet potato fluff doesn't taste like this. They didn't,
right,
because they never had anything to show them that it can taste different, look different, feel.
Mhm.
So I think other parts of that,
Yes.
what do I need at the table so I can recognize who's missing?
Man,
Mhm.
you know, I have a friend. This is funny. It's not funny, but it's funny. He told me about this. He told me about this story. One of his overseers was in town visiting his church, and they're having like lunch, and he looks over at the table and he says, "Man, I want a diverse church like yours." And his overseer looked at him and said, "Nah, you don't."
Mhm.
I mean, can you imagine saying like being in a meeting, having lunch, and you say, "Man," like, and you're thinking that person is going to give you some wisdom and something like that, but the overseer looks him in his face and said, "No, you don't."
Mm.
He's
Wow.
like, "What do you mean?" He said, "You don't want a diverse church." So they get into an argument. It sounds like something I would do. Like, just get into an argument over it. And finally, the overseer looked at him. And this is to your point, Jennifer, about the deeper question. He said, until you're convinced that you need Black people, your church will never be diverse.
Mm.
And I think the principle is still true until we're convinced that, number one, what needs do we have so that people can be invited to the table? But then simultaneously, am I convinced that somebody even needs to be at the table?
Mm-hmm.
And like, am I convinced that I actually need people at the table? It's interesting because we can create tables for people that we run.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think dealing with that question of like, who do we need? In fact, do I know that I need them? Because if they fill that table with a need, but don't feel from you or I that they're needed, then they won't stay long anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also to that point, as I'm bringing people to the table, am I bringing them because of their name, or am I bringing them because of their quality?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people that are building tables and they're just adding people because of the name, because of, they got 500 people liking their post every day.
Mm-hmm.
That person's substance, when it comes deep down to doing work, that person's a great showsman, they're a great salesman, but they don't have what it takes to build at the table.
Yeah.
So now you got a name with no work ethic. You got a name with no substance.
Right.
You're even more frustrated because you're like, wait a minute, you supposed to be this great name. I done pulled you in, but I'm not benefiting from you. You're actually more of a hindrance than anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I call that?
What?
Ministry tokenism.
That's a good one.
Ministry token.
We need to put that on the social media. Ministry tokenism.
Because we all know what tokenism in the ethnic way of thinking about things, right? It's like if I have an all whatever organization, maybe it's an all white organization, or maybe it's an all brown, whatever the organization is. Mm-hmm. Tokenism says, because I don't want to appear as racist, I'll go out and hire somebody and add them to my table. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to your point, like, I think we can run into ministry tokenism. Oh, we got so-and-so because he or she has this much influence, or he or she has these many, like you said, these many followers or likes, or because at the end of the day, what we're saying, what Jennifer, Jade, and I are saying is the greatest question that we can ask so that missional results are happening is, number one, who needs to be at the table? Number two, what do we need? Why are they there? Are they does their character, competence, and chemistry match the call that this table even exists for? Mm. And I think we're having a conversation around this because this is really important, because when you think about Gen Z, listen, Facebook did a study, I think 30,000 churches, I believe. And they wanted to analyze the effects of the pandemic. Mm. And one of the things that Facebook said that needs to happen for any organization that has a brand is that organization needs to become great at facilitating the building of relationships is what Gen Z said.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went on to say that if you're going to be a stellar organization, then you have to create opportunities to have shared memories. Well, where does that happen? At the table. From a just a food perspective, Miss Foodie over there.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, I went to one of my friends. He has something called Black Coffee, and he serves all kind of food. He's an amazing guy. It's in the hood, and it's on my Facebook page. I think you guys should go watch it and be jealous. Not y'all. I'm talking about the audience. But my friend made these cheesy grits, and then he put the catfish on house gravy. I mean, it was like amazing. And I'm trying to remember why I'm bringing this up. Oh, here's why. Because when I got my meal, he sat down with me and like we started to talk. Like in every culture, it's like we build commonality and shared experiences and memories over food.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Facebook said is that we need to curate those type of experiences where we can share in new experiences and memories with people who have entered our circle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Facebook went on to say that our circles have gotten a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when we're talking about these circles and these tables, it's the quality of people that we have at the table, if we even have them at the table.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
You know, I have a tattoo right here say "Better Together."
Aww.
Better together, and I really do think we're better together. Hey, to our audience, we hope this conversation has been stimulating. We hope it's been helpful. We really want to see you, our churches alike, really experience like high level impact. And we believe as we've laid out this series that I think this is one of our linchpin series, that in this season we do have to ask 7 foundational questions to move forward in the future. We do have to think about, who's not at the table. We do have to think about metaphor. We do have to think about shifts that we need to make. And we want to encourage you to go back and check out this whole series. Jade and Jennifer, before we land, is there anything you might add that could be helpful to help a pastor leader think through becoming a more inclusive, inviting leader that builds tables where people can sit at? Is there anything you might add?
I think humility will help. Just the acknowledgement that although God speaks to you and he's given you vision, you don't know everything that God has in store or God has in mind. And when you are able to acknowledge that you don't know anything, that opens you up more to the possibility of asking questions. Sometimes when we think that we know everything, we don't see a need to ask questions. We don't see the need to ask for opinions. And we don't see the need of inviting anyone to the table. So just the pure acknowledgement of that you don't know everything, you hardly know anything, really, with things, and the fact that we prophesy in part, and there's other people with the other pieces. Once we acknowledge that and humble ourselves to that reality, then I think it will become a lot easier to have the conversations with other people about what are they thinking, what is God speaking to you, what vision do you have, what part of the vision do you feel like you can play, and the fact that we don't need to do everything alone. I think those are the 2 main ones. So humble yourselves, people.
I love it.
I would say from a marketing standpoint, and I was just reading something today about finding your target audience. And one of the things that I think we do in ministry is we always think pulpit first. We never dig into the pews and find out who are we serving, what are their interests, their needs, what speaks to them. And so I would invite pastors to, create a focus group within your church that you can
Wow.
It's good.
get those people to come and tell you, meet with them on a weekly basis. Hey, what did you think about my sermon? Did it resonate with you? Did it speak to you? What can we change about our service? What can we change about how we present ourselves to the community? And let your congregation work with you. Build that upper room experience. If you don't have it in your church already, create it. So that's my
Yeah,
That's
so that's so good. So we want to leave the audience with 3 steps you can take today. The first thing Jay said is, like number 1, we have to admit we don't know everything. And if we're going to be honest, that may be simple, but that's hard. And if we're honest, like, folks love their ego stroke. And it's like, no, at the end of the day, we're in the family of God. And if I'm not constantly reminding myself, man, I don't know everything. I saw a post today, Jade, so interesting. It says, when you know everything, you'll never ask a question. And if you never ask a question, you never learn anything new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so dope. And then Jennifer said, create a focus group, because the higher we go in our leadership, it just blows my mind, metaphor. When we create hierarchies, organizational charts, we distance ourselves from the people systematically.
Yeah.
So we have to create focus groups to make sure that the groundswell of what God is doing actually gets facilitated through all of us. The only thing I would add to that is begin getting into the habit of doing 2 things. Number 1, when somebody comes to you with a problem or vision, refrain from giving our own input and then just ask the question, what do you think? If we can just get into the habit of, what do you think? What do you think? We can get to the habit. I don't know everything. Focus groups are important. So I need that because I don't know everything. And that if I can continue habitually every day asking, hey, what do you think? Hey, what is God saying to you? That will help inch the ball forward, I think, when it comes to the missional results God wants for us. That's all we got today, y'all. Hey, we sincerely hope, this has been a blessing. The reason why we love this show is, number 1, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We will literally break out in laughter prayer like Jennifer did at the beginning. And then our internet will cut out, and then I'll hop back in like I'm omnipresent, like I never left. So you will get all of that at the Church Next show. You don't want to miss next week. We kick off for a new series, Wonder Women on Mission. I'm sorry, that's in 2 weeks. We have my friend Ben here next week. And then also the Business Made Missional Summit is coming up. You don't want to miss it. Capturing the entrepreneurial imagination of the local church, how to fund what God has called you to move, and then also put food on your table. So go sign up, leadnet.org. Jennifer and Jade, it's been a pleasure. Our Leadership Network audience, we love you guys. And